My name is Jerry Sullivan. I'm the National Managing Editor of The Real Deal, and I'm here with Leo Pustilnikov, local developer, and there we go. And the main topic of our conversation today will be builder's remedy. And could I get a show of hands? How many of you feel like you have a good understanding of what builder's remedy is? Or how much of an explanation do we need to do? Maybe a little explanation is in order. Builder's remedy is essentially, it's not a law. It's essentially a concept that's accommodated by various state laws and local laws, I guess, that essentially says if localities are not hitting a state designated target on how much residential development they should be completing, then there's an override, and developers don't have to observe local zoning, and they can proceed with projects without local approval, essentially. So there's all kinds of aspects to this. Local control, is it a state overreach, so on and so forth. But it's a matter of great opportunity and interest. I was almost run down in the driveway today by a lady who came all the way from, there she is. It was my fault. I was walking, it wasn't a pedestrian entrance. But it turns out as I stepped up to apologize to her, we got talking. She came all the way from Palmdale just to hear about this subject and what kind of opportunities. So, there is a great deal of interest. And so, Leo, maybe you could just introduce yourself and also introduce your project. Leo is a very interesting project in Redondo Beach, which is, I would call it a great test case for builder's remedy, both its potential and its challenges. So, Leo, why don't you just give an overview?
Howdy. So thank you for having me. Redondo is should I go into overview?
Well, you did, yeah.
Redondo or builder's remedy or?
Let's talk about it. You got 150. You bought it for 150 million. It's an old.
It's an old power plant, or it's an active power plant actually. It still provides some of the electricity that we need until the end of this year. It's supposed to retire due to once-through cooling, which was state law in 2010 and has been extended. This is the only one that wasn't extended for the next 3 years with Huntington Beach, Ormond, Alamitos, and Diablo Canyon were extended, as well as a DWP plant. So I bought it before, obviously, builder's remedy was possible or practical. Builder's remedy has been on the books since 1990, which is coincidentally the year I came to this country. And it essentially, as you mentioned, if cities are not compliant on their RENA numbers, RENA has been around actually before that since '82. And every year the state strengthens the required compliance. So actually until really January 1st of 2020, you couldn't really have a builder's remedy because you didn't have SB 330, which vested your rights at the time of your application, of your pre-application. So you had a moving target. A city could become compliant while you had applied and said, oh, well, too bad, you didn't go through the process fast enough. You didn't go through the process fast enough, and we're compliant now, so, all your work is for nothing. So SB 330 got signed in 2019, became effective 2020, and so Redondo is essentially a walkable city. It's 50 acres, 2,700 units, 500,000 square feet of office, retail, hotel, whatever you could fancy.
And so that state law that enabled this was really, it was like a fuse that lit this thing that had been sitting there since 1990.
Yes.
It was on the concept was there, but the state law gave it some avenue and teeth. And so that's what's caused the change. It's kind of fantastic that when you think about the Pacific coastline in Los Angeles County, that there's a big energy plant sitting right there, covering 50 acres with an oceanfront view, everything else. And now here's an opportunity to maybe redo that, rethink that. And you're sort of stuck in the mud at this point with the city and the legal challenges and everything else. But let me just ask you, what is it? You bought this before builder's remedy was in play.
Yes.
So you saw the potential.
Yes.
Now, builder's remedy isn't just go do what you want. It's all contingent upon you have to have a 20% affordable component, right? Was that in the original plan?
The original plan, so when I was negotiating to buy the plant, I had met with the city officials, and I asked them a very simple thing. I don't care what I build. Can I just build a certain size of a project? And they said, yeah. They're like, we want office, we want this, we want hotel. I'm like, okay, great, I don't mind. As long as I could build something, I really don't care what it is. But then COVID hit, and office is now somewhat toxic. And the laws changed and have become more favorable and continue to become more favorable. There's another law that was enacted, and hopefully the governor signs AB 1633 that will benefit the environmental review, because even though you have builder's remedy, you could bypass the process of city planning, you still have to go through the environmental reviews. And the environmental reviews, as we know, are in some cases onerous. So yeah.
So now you go 150 million on buying the property. You're into some legal disputes, might add some to that, everything else. But when you switch to builder's remedy, you add the 20% affordable. Mm-hmm. How does that pencil out?
With a project that size, it could work. You also have to realize people wonder how I came up with the idea of the size of the project and scale. It's actually very similar to the size that existed in 2001 with the heart of the city. So there was a redevelopment proposal and an MOU between AES and the city of Redondo Beach, where AES was to buy the tank farm and take down some of the smokestacks, all of which it did. And Redondo was to rezone it, and they did an environmental report that's still actually good today. They relied on it in 2009 for the most recent update of their local coastal plan. And that brought out a number of people from the community that were upset about the project, and they killed it. So there was a heart of the city plan, and my plan is essentially a rebirth of that 21 years later, or 22 years later.
So we have an industrial property on the California shoreline, and a proposal to turn it into something a little more amenable to its surrounding area, right? Something non-industrial. That sounds good. There's a change in the market and a change in the state law, and you decide you're going to go ahead with a plan that adds 20% affordable in a region with a housing crunch, and that sounds pretty good. And you're stuck on this with the city. What is the objection to what you're putting on the table here?
For those that don't know Redondo, their objection is everything and anything. So if you look at the coastline in Redondo, they've created 2 net new units in the last decade in the coastline. There was a Center Cal project for their decrepit waterfront that was mired in litigation for close to a decade. I used to own the pier in Redondo. I sold it because I never saw any opportunity for it to be redeveloped. They're averse to change. It's we have it, you don't, stay out. And you could see it in I don't know if you saw the NBC interview with the council member who said, well, if you're building affordable housing, shouldn't it be more inland? Like if you have to work your way up for a water view. And I don't think that's what anyone intended anywhere outside of Redondo, but here we are now.
And so now you have a state government that's very much pushing for the housing. And actually, I think one of the points of builder's remedy is to try and spread out affordable housing, to try and get it in more than certain neighborhoods in certain cities. And so this would seem to fill that bill. It also would be one of the examples where, and it sounds to me like it would pencil out, in an upscale market.
Yeah, so because of the 20% affordable, you essentially have to rely on doing it in more upscale markets, which is why my projects have primarily focused on Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, Redondo Beach, and so forth, because they're more affluent markets, and some of the cities are favorable and receptive towards affordable housing, and some cities are not.
And just to break that down, so the upscale market would allow you to a higher margin to offset a lower margin on the affordable. Is that how it works out?
Well, a negative margin on the affordable, but yes.
Okay, negative, so it covers and then a little affords some profit on the negative margin of the affordable.
Correct.
Okay, so that seems to be what the ideal solution to the housing crunch.
Well, it's an ideal solution towards making sure it's not concentrated. One of the issues with downtown LA, for example, is you have concentrated homelessness, and since COVID, it's deteriorated quite significantly. So the idea of scattering it and housing everyone in every community, the whole idea of equality is spread very well through this concept, although certain cities that obviously don't like it aren't very receptive to it, like Beverly Hills. You guys wrote about it last week where they lost to the lawsuit to Californians for homeownership on their, I'm not sure what they call their compliance.
Now you run into some organized opposition in Redondo Beach. There's a political culture or political structure there that is pretty well organized to oppose you.
I mean, they're organized in many ways. They've won elections for now a decade. They control the majority of council. They actually had a huge upset with the loss of one council seat that they expected to get recently, because people are now getting fed up because they keep being promised, don't worry, we're going to get a massive public park. And the money, don't worry, it'll enhance your property value. We'll find the money from the state or from the sky or wherever, from the heavens. But, you could say that for a year, for 5 years, for 10 years, but you can't say it forever. Eventually, people wisen up. It's like, you fool me once, shame on me. You fool me twice, shame on me. You fool me a third time, something wrong.
It was
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And still in all, you do run in that organized opposition. What do you bring other than your attorney?
That's it.
Yeah?
All I need is an attorney in the law. I come from a country that's lawless, that's been in the news lately the last few years, and I thank God that I'm here and not there every day. Today is my...
You're from the Ukraine.
What is now the Ukraine.
Yeah.
If you asked me 2 years ago, I was Soviet. I keep changing even though I'm still from the same place. But yeah, so it's a blessing to be here, and this is... I'd never have this opportunity there, so I'm very happy for it, and I do believe that ultimately my position is anchored in the law, and that the courts will be my salvation, and that they will find that the cities are in error and will have to comply with the law that they think they're above and beyond.
And I wish you well on that, but I also want to ask you, could you use a little help? I mean, do any of your fellow developers, you're a bit of a poster boy for the, at least the effort on this. Is anybody backing you up that way? You get any calls from your fellow developers cheering you on?
I mean, look, everyone's excited for it. No one wants to risk their neck. So like you look at Santa Monica. Santa Monica, it became a big hoopla when Neil submitted all his projects. I'd submitted a project 4 months prior to Neil. It didn't make any news because at the time it was a sensible development. If you look at all my developments, even in Beverly Hills, you could argue one not as much, but they're generally sensible with the community they're in. I don't have a single project in Beverly Hills, for example, where I'm proposing a tall building adjacent to single-family homes in Beverly Hills, even though their mixed-use ordinance allows for 7, 8-story buildings. So I try to pick the sites that I place the housing specifically to make it make sense with the community in mind.
With all that in mind, would you like to have some organization or a little more support from your fellow developers?
It'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, what I was mentioning is one of the reasons I was so early on in this is so the way I got to Builders Remedy is I was speaking to an attorney who sues a lot of cities. And I've been following the Housing Accountability Act for a while, and I always knew that there was going to be something there for me with regards to Redondo. And I spoke to him, he's like, I don't see why anyone doesn't do Builders Remedy. Well, as you mentioned in the intro, there's really no Builders Remedy per se in the code. It's a colloquial term. So you look it up online and you see Builders Remedy New Jersey, Builders Remedy Georgia. You don't see anything in the law here. So you start reading the Housing Accountability Act and you're like, oh, maybe that's what he means. But when I did it, I called a number of large law firms that I've worked with over the years. And I'm like, I want to do Builders Remedy with SB 330 protections. And like, we don't know that you could do that. We don't think it'll apply. And it wasn't until Dave Rand, who's now my attorney in Beverly Hills and Santa Monica, got a letter from HCD saying, yeah, builder's remedy vests your rights under SB 330 vests your rights under builder's remedy, that it was off to the races with a lot of other developers. But by then I was already out there on my own, and sometimes I feel like I'm still there on my own, but it is what it is.
And how much of it speaks to a larger political point? In other words, let me play the devil's advocate. Builder's remedy is an overreach by the state, and it takes away local control, and it destroys a community's ability to shape itself. Now, what do you say to that?
It is a blunt tool, and if abused, it could be bad for communities, but it's also supposed to essentially inform them to become compliant. It's like when you're driving and you're at a red light, are you stopped or are you racing down trying to pass whatever cars are there? You don't want to try to pass through a red light and get hit. Same concept. You have blunt tool, cars passing you by while you're on a red. So I see it as no different. If they just, one of the problems is for many decades, and again, since '82, I could have given you my 4-year-old's drawing, and that would have sufficed for RENA and for the housing element. They didn't really review it. There were no teeth. It wasn't until the housing crisis that we really started to more or less care, take, or realize that the reason we have a housing shortage is because of NIMBY cities that don't allow you to build housing. And so now we're trying to cure it in the same way we've let it fester. So yeah, we had by letting cities not provide housing or their fair share of housing for many decades, we've led to this crisis, and now we're essentially trying to cure it by doing the same thing.
And now I'd recommend everybody read the story, the profile that we did on Leo. It was quite insightful and a really good read. One of the things it mentioned there is that some of the opposition you face in Redondo has played race cards, played outsiders versus insiders, those other people from other cities in LA County. So as all this comes into play, does this get a little dangerous if we don't handle this correctly?
I've heard it from other developers in Redondo. I've never had that issue, and I've heard he's not from here, we need a local, but I haven't really seen it. No one's showed up at my house yet, so thank God for that. Let's hope it stays.
Yeah, it's a complicated picture down there. Compare it to Beverly Hills, because you have a project there too, and they're both proceeding under builder's remedy, right?
I have close to a dozen projects in Beverly Hills.
Okay.
So in aggregate, Beverly Hills may soon be larger not larger, but comparatively. In Beverly Hills, the irony is Redondo's outside attorneys for housing-related litigation are Beverly Hills attorneys. So they use the same law firm. Yeah. And they take, I would say, different approaches. In Beverly Hills, they're sort of, how do you say this politely? They stick their head in the sand and hope that it's a mirage that they're seeing or experiencing. So, I don't know, Beverly Hills is, yeah, we'll see. It's funny because I think they have the weakest hand out of all the cities that I work in, but I guess we'll see.
Well, let me ask you, could it be a mirage? This will be tested in the courts. There is a lot of political power behind the faction that doesn't want builder's remedy. The courts, I think, will delay it to the point where the politics can play out. Could it be a mirage?
Well, so far every ruling in the courts has been favorable towards builder's remedy. You have Alex in the audience who had the La Cañada case that won, which was actually Matt with Californians for Home Ownership. He also had a similar case in Beverly Hills that he won last week. So every court so far has said builder's remedy applies. The city of Beverly Hills, they self-certified without any of the findings, and they used the language HCD used, which is we're substantially compliant, but we're not fully compliant, and thus we're compliant. So we wrote HCD and we're like, does that mean that they're compliant? And HCD said, you know what, we're not going to give you a letter for that. We're going to give Beverly Hills a letter for that. And the reply to Beverly Hills was, you're not substantially compliant. You're not fully compliant. You're nowhere near compliant. That's what you are. And so they tried to use these catchy words and they got stuck. And then separately, HCD sent us a letter saying, even if Beverly Hills were compliant on its housing element with the bare minimum requirements, which the court recently ruled they don't meet the bare minimum requirements, Dave, which I don't know if he's in the audience or not, found that there's a builder's remedy 2.0, which is even if you have a fully compliant housing element, but your suitable site inventory is deficient, you're still susceptible to builder's remedy. But there, you're only susceptible to builder's remedy on zones that have underlying residential zoning. So there's many forms of builder's remedy that the state seems to believe exists. And thus far, the courts have sided with it every single time. And in the La Cañada case, they said, well, Californians for Homeownership are not a developer. If they were, they would be inclined to issue the writ to force them to process the development. In Beverly Hills, we're still waiting on the final judgment or proposed judgment, but it'll likely have something that forces them to process all the builder's remedies. And then separately, the cities could hang their hat on CEQA and try to hang CEQA over your head. Well, that's where AB 1633 comes into hand if the government signs it in the next few weeks, or doesn't veto it, rather. And that says if a city could have used the CEQA exemption but didn't, because they wanted additional studies, because there's no shortage of exemptions, whether it's infill housing or whatever, then that's a violation of the Housing Accountability Act as well. So day by day, year by year, the walls are closing in on the cities. Redondo's biggest saving grace is, oh, well, we're in the coastal zone, so hopefully that'll create another problem. Okay, the courts will adjudicate it. The legislature next year is actually taking up a number of coastal legislative actions that will likely completely eradicate Redondo's only saving grace. So it's a matter of time, as I see it.
How much time do you have? And you know, right now it sounds like this is right now it's a dream for lawyers and lobbyists.
Yes.
Right, and that's going to go on for a while. And now you're talking about a timeline of years.
Yes.
Right, and so how much time do you have? And for all the progress or the winning cases, and every case has been a favorable ruling, when would you expect to get a shovel in the ground in Redondo in a best case scenario?
I think Redondo is going to be the last builder's remedy in the state that hits a shovel in the ground, just due to its size and magnitude, and the many issues. Like with most builder's remedies, you have one writ lawsuit. In Redondo, I have 6 lawsuits pending, and then YIMBY Law has a lawsuit. So YIMBY Law actually came on board to try to facilitate with the builder's remedy project. So yeah, Redondo's probably best case 5 years away. 5
years if everything breaks right in court and everything else.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of risk you're carrying on $150 million up front.
So a lot of time, yeah.
Yeah. And the story, the profile we did of Leo, it also mentioned that you sort of go for the deals, unusual deals, complicated deals. Deals, I think one colleague of yours said, Leo likes those deals with some hair on them and special circumstances. Speculated that without all the complications in Redondo, right, especially the political, which, as you alluded to it, they go back way before you were there, the heart of the city plan and everything else. But that's $1 billion piece of property you got for $150 million without the headaches.
So it's worth the time, no?
So that's my question. So how much is 5 years? What do you lose on your margin every year?
I mean, look, I've already been in it for what, 3 years?
Yeah.
So another 5, it's more or less what I anticipated getting into it. With regards to, so people call me a developer, but they should really call me a barber, because that's what I specialize in. If you look at any project, any commercial building I've owned in Beverly Hills, I bought the land and the building separate, and then I merge them and I sell them, and thank God they're worth a little bit more. So, you know, it's hard to make a profit otherwise. So you go on the fringe and you rely on that.
And how do you get your backers? How do you sell them on that notion, especially now when it looks like it's going to stretch out?
I mean, thank God most of what we've spent has been exchange money. So we've done very well on a few projects, and we keep recycling and moving on and recycling.
So you're essentially paying it out of,
Profits.
yeah, your own cash flow or profits or your own operation. You have partners.
Yes.
How do they feel about it?
You know, it'd be nice if it were quicker and it didn't cost as much, but they believe that at the end of the day, that we'll see sunshine.
Okay, they never call you up and say, Leo, come on now.
You know, we've been fortunate enough times that I don't think they're concerned.
Okay, so you got the track record. They're going to ride with you on this.
I hope so. We'll
Yeah,
see.
yeah, okay. Getting back to that, so now you got let's say that it is $1 billion piece of property without the headaches. Okay, you put in 150 and assume the headaches, right? But it does give you that flexibility. You were able to switch over to builder's remedies. Okay, we'll do 20% affordability. We can make that work because of the basis.
Yeah, and if you look, AES, which sold it to us, bought it for $250 in '97, and I don't know anywhere else in LA where a property declined by 40% over 25 years.
Yeah, especially oceanfront property.
Yeah, must be bad ocean.
So that flexibility, what could you do from here? In other words, let's say builder's remedy went away and you didn't have to put in the 20%.
Yeah, but if you look at it, anything you're doing with a density bonus, you're pretty much going to hit the 15% to get the 50% anyway. So it's really not that you're doing 20%. You're doing in excess 5. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's marginal. It's a marginal increase. Yeah.
Relatively speaking.
How about you mentioned that the original plan, the first plan came before the pandemic. Still 500,000 square feet of office, or might you trim that back?
Yeah, I mean, at one point I looked at it as a pure studio redevelopment, and I had a very large user that was interested, except the city refused to talk. And they actually would have been happy with that, except, you know, when you can't communicate with someone, it's hard to make a deal.
Do you mean a Hollywood studio, production studio?
Yes.
And the city wouldn't return their call?
The city would not, no. I'm not exactly loved there.
Huh, that's, even given that, that's a surprise. You mentioned earlier your background, and when you and I spoke on the phone in advance of this, and you talked, you also mentioned rule of law, but you have a very interesting, unique, I think, personal and professional perspective on that. And your play now really does, when you said, yeah, it's me and my attorney and the law. Mm-hmm. Just talk a little bit about what the rule of law means to you in this regard, both, as a deal, but also as someone who came to this country with some ambition and hope.
Yeah, so I mean, as you mentioned, I was born in what was then the USSR, what is now Ukraine. And in that country, everything was done on bribes. So applying to schools, getting into colleges, getting a job, it all relied on bribes. And what I love about this country is it has nothing to, well, I mean, I guess if you look at some of the LA council members, who knows? But generally speaking, here you could work hard and be successful without having to do something underhanded. And it's because we are a country of laws. Granted, even in Redondo, and there's no shortage of examples I could give you where the law is somewhat bent on the city's side because they have great relations with this agency or that agency. And you have to deal with it. These are the headaches you step into to make a multiple on your money. So
now, on the Redondo project, tell me what you've spent so far, not the purchase price, but everything else about the project, the carrying cost, everything else. What percentage of it has been legal fees?
Well, legal fees and legal fees have definitely gotten more than, it's probably legals 50 to 60%, environmentals another 30%, and then 10% miscellaneous.
Got it. Okay. Well, at this point, I think, I'm not sure where we are on time, but I think if there's any questions, and I wanted to give the lady who almost ran me over, if you have any questions you'd like to ask Leo, because I know you very specifically were trying to get some information on that. Did this help, by the way?
That was very helpful.
Okay.
I feel like now I just have homework to do, so I got to go and look at the law, become more familiar with that. I know just on a very small level, that really you're dealing, because you're dealing with, we call them clerks, because you're just dealing with clerks. It's just very, yeah, you just got to stand your ground. So I'm excited to have a little bit more about all of this.
That's an interesting point. Who do you deal with? Do you deal with elected officials? Do you deal with professional staff at the city?
So when I started in Redondo, I dealt with the mayor and some of his supporters, since they control the council effectively, and they directed city staff. Now my attorney deals with whoever it is in Redondo. I refuse to go there. In Beverly Hills, we've met with the city attorney. We haven't met with any of the elected officials. They don't want to meet. They don't want to talk. They just want to continue down their rabbit hole. So in each city, it's different. But yeah, we're generally not dealing with the elected officials, because the elected officials don't want to believe that it's happening.
The mirage. Back to
Yeah.
the theory of the mirage. Yes.
Hello. Yeah, so Santa Monica and West Hollywood are the most receptive. I'd probably say West Hollywood more so than Santa Monica. And they're both cities that are very pro-housing, pro-affordable housing. They believe in the cause. And so they don't make much of a fuss about it. I mean, Santa Monica had issues with Neil's developments, but his were also 20-story towers next to houses. And I've sort of stayed away from that.
How about
There just seems to be so much obstacles that the local officials are putting on development. Is there anything that the development community, are they doing anything to sort of fight this or try to get people who are more pro-business or more pro-development?
So publicly, no one wants to do anything because developers develop, and they need to rely on their relationships with cities, and they don't want to hurt those relationships. So like I spoke to a developer in Beverly Hills, and he's like, yeah, I consider builder's remedy, but the city said if I do it, I'm dead to them. I can't get a permit for a cafe, I can't get a TI permit, I can't get anything. So a lot of people are afraid. And
Politicians, they come and go, and you guys own these properties. You're at major risk because we outlaid $150 million for the Redondo properties. And look, you mentioned yourself that it's gone down in value over the course of 25 years, while all the other real estate around the city and around that area. So maybe there is, maybe there's the value that you thought was there is not actually, it can't be possible or it can't be realized because you're not able to change.
So two things. So the first thing you said about politicians come and go, the mayor of Redondo became politically active with the heart of the city in 99, 2000, 2001. He's the mayor today. He gets termed out in 25. So come and go is a quarter century of coming and going. And since then, he used to be the sole vote on the council, and he ended up having the majority. So as long as he could get his people elected, there is no coming and going. And in Beverly Hills, it's I'd say it's different, but right now it's been a shorter process. So yeah, the two people that I'd probably say are and I'm not going to mention names, but I'll say they're termed out next year. So maybe next year will be a better year than this year. So yeah, there's a risk premium, and it's a function of time. So in 97, you have to also look at, in 97 it was bought as a utility, and a utility was regulated. You had a certain cash flow. You knew what you were getting as the cash flow, and it's a great yield. So they bought it in part with that, and part with the MOU that they signed with the city that they learned the hard way, as I have, and everyone else that's developed in Redondo. But if you look at the most recent project that's in construction in Redondo right now, which is Ed Zucker's project from Legato, he spent 10 years litigating to get it approved. But it's under construction today.
So he's gotten started. So they come and go, and I guess it's time for us to go at this point. So I want you to thank you all for spending your time with us. And thank you, Leo.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.